Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jenna Quinn, and it's my pleasure as the Assistant Director of Alumni and Affinity Engagement to welcome you all to this edition of the 49er Industry Chat Series. And just so everyone's aware, the session is being recorded, and really what that means for you is that it's going to be available to you again on demand on our website at www.csulb.edu/alumni. So feel free to watch it again, share it with a friend or a colleague or anyone you think might get something good out of it. And now with that, I am so happy to introduce Dr. Tom Housel. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks. Thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just read off a quick bio for you so folks can get to know a little bit more about you before we get started. So Dr. Tom Housel, a tenured full professor at the Naval Postgraduate Naval Postgraduate College?
Naval Postgraduate School. I don't know why we call it a school, but
Well, anyway, the Naval Postgraduate School, specializing in econophysics, value forecasting, and intellectual capital valuation, boasts expertise in telecommunications, information technology, and value-based business process and reengineering. His teaching portfolio spans homeland defense technology, research methods, knowledge management, and electronic business. Presently, he delves into the econophysics model for technology adoption forecasts and real options models for military decision making. Previously, he was a research fellow at USC's Center for Telecommunications Management and chief business process engineer at Pacific Bell. Notably, his work at Telecom Italia in Venice focused on forecasting adoption rates for new multimedia application. Housel's contribution to intellectual capital valuations has earned recognition in Fortune, Investors Business Daily, and academic journals, including the Journal of Intellectual Capital. His authored books include Measuring and Managing Knowledge and Global Telecommunications Revolution, The Business Perspective. Housel earned his Ph.D. from the University of Utah in 1980 and received the Society for Information Management's prestigious award for Best Paper in 1986. Tom, that is definitely a shortened bio than what I originally got, but still just incredibly impressive. So thank you so much for being here.
thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's get right into it. Let's start off with a little bit of background. Can you tell me about your life and your experiences and pretty much, what led you to come to CSULB in the first place?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a little bit of a circuitous story. Um, as I was graduating from high school, I was looking. Unfortunately, the Vietnam War was in full bloom at that point, and how can I put this in a pleasant way? One reason for not going to Canada was I joined the California Air National Guard, and the base was in Ontario, California, which is basically where I grew up at the airport there. And so I was out for a year because of that, and then after that, I was looking at four-year institutions, colleges that I could join in the coming fall. And one of the things that was really interesting about CSULB was they reached out to me early. I was accepted everywhere I applied, but they came to me very quickly and offered to allow me to join the general honors program. And they had their own set of classes, and they had an interview essay, in-person interview, group interview. to see whether I was worthy to join. So that was one of the reasons I went to CSULB, because they came to me very quickly. The other reason was it's by the ocean and the
You
weather's
can't beat
good.
that.
And the weather's good, and the tuition was very, very minimal at the time. And so the living cost of living was much lower at that point in time. That was long ago. And so I joined CSULB and didn't never have regretted it since. But during my time in the general honors program, the professor that ran the program, his name was August Cupola. Now, you may know the name Cupola from Francis Ford Coppola, and that was his older brother, Augie, and his father of Nicolas Cage, as a matter of fact. Cage was, a young kid at the time, so I didn't get to know him. But um, uh, it was interesting because we built something. There were a lot of projects that you probably couldn't get away with today because of liability issues. But we built something called the Tactile Symposium for the Mabex building, the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco, and it was a giant, uh, pretty good sized dome that was all you crawled, you fell, you walked through it, and it was all in the dark, so it was tactile. So it was a tactile symposium, and so that to do that, we had to go to live in San Francisco for the summer. Again, I don't know that they'd get away with this today. And we took Francis Ford Coppola's South 4th Street warehouse and turned it into a dormitory for us. We had to build showers and so on and so forth. And occasionally we would go over into his music studio and listen to whoever was playing there, like Santana and some of these other groups would come in and do recordings. It was kind of fun. And drive around in San Francisco in my little Datsun pickup truck, hauling things around, driving like a maniac. And it was loads of fun. So that was an experience. I don't know that and I don't know how difficult that would be to repeat today because of all kinds of regulations and things and so on. But it was a lot of fun, and just one of the many things that made the general honors program interesting. And to get a, you know, to get a certificate, it's really not a certificate, it's graduate with honors in a sense, but more like graduate with an honors certificate because I did a study of compressed and distributed learning. So if you ever cram for a test, that's compressed learning. That's really not the best way to do it. Excuse me, I have a cough that doesn't seem to want to go away.
Oh, no problem.
And after Long Beach State, I was looking around. I was planning to go there for a master's degree, and originally I had at Long Beach, I had enrolled in the psychology department. And when I realized that they were interested in running rats through mazes and not interested in social psychology, which is what I was interested in, I was wandering around one time at one of the fairs there, and there were some folks from the communication department, speech communication department, and I talked to them and I said, "Oh, so this is more what I was interested in." So I switched to that major. Never regretted it. As we know, there are many communication problems in the world today, and they continue. So from that, uh, at one point, I was talking to my advisor as I had entered the master's program at Long Beach State, and I planned to go to USC and finish a Ph.D. there in speech communication. And I said, Gene, I'm getting kind of bored. It's sort of the same stuff I had as an undergraduate. And he said, somebody just called me from the University of Wyoming. They have a teaching assistantship there. And so you wouldn't pay, you don't pay tuition, plus they pay you this minimum amount that you can, at the time, could actually live on. And of course, you have to teach some classes and so on. And, it's a fairly rigorous program. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds interesting. And University of Wyoming is part of the family history. My uncle, who owned a small ranch in near Cody, Wyoming, is only 72,000 square acres with 1,000 head of cattle and 2,000 head of sheep. And his whole family, including him, went to the University of Wyoming, and so did my father. And so there was a little history there, and I thought, well, why not? So loaded up the car. Was the semester had started already. The person that I was replacing basically had started teaching three undergraduate classes, and I got to take over those three undergraduate classes. It was rather intense, and while I was doing that, I was taking a full load, 15 units, semester units, and trying to figure out how to generate some publications because that's the academic world.
Absolutely.
And so I taught five classes in 1 year while I was at University of Wyoming, never having taught a class before in my life, and it was a blast, and I really enjoyed it. And it was hard, quite hard, and quite intense. Got married in the middle of the year. That was my poor wife, who had never seen snow in her life. Really.
A shock
Can,
to a system.
yeah, can you imagine? Can you imagine driving from Long Beach, because she was a Long Beach girl? Can you imagine driving from Long Beach and hitting, you know, just outside of Las Vegas, 2 feet of snow on the road? It's a good thing she had a Carmen Ghia, which was pretty much like a four-wheel drive today. And so we made it to Wyoming by hook and by crook. I finished the degree in 1 year. I had to do comprehensive tests, and I had to defend those tests, comprehensive orals, and had to do my thesis, which involved collection of data from 250 what are called now participants. We used to call them subjects. And it was an experimental study, and was able to get that turned into a paper that was presented at a conference that was refereed. This is all academic things that most people don't care about, but for academics, that's important. And then after that year in Wyoming, looked around for a PhD program and looked at USC again, decided no, looked at all of the programs. I looked at University of Michigan, a lot of good programs, Oregon and Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, and so on. The one that I liked the best looked most interesting to me was University of Utah. So I went to University. I accepted a teaching fellowship there. And again, taught classes are not quite as intense as it was at Wyoming. And that's typically, if you do everything perfectly, is a 3 year, after the master's degree, of 3 years more. Well, after 2 years and a lot of courses and some publications along the way, never ceased to try to publish the whole time. I was in the academic world, even as an undergraduate. That's pretty pretentious. I was trying to publish my thesis, my undergraduate thesis, but didn't quite make it. But so I was there 2 years, and a job opportunity came up as a visiting assistant professor at the University of Kentucky. And I thought, oh, well, I can begin my academic career early and finish my dissertation while I'm in Kentucky as an assistant professor. So I had to hurry up and take my comprehensive written exam, 22 hours written, 2 hours of defense, presentation of my proposal for my dissertation. This is all boring. I know this is only if you're an academic does this even mean anything to you. And did some, by the way, for the business folks, while I was at the University of Kentucky, or University of Utah, I had done some research actually at the University of Wyoming, which again, you probably wouldn't get away with today, on shoplifting, where we actually had folks that were our allies would go and shoplift in front of someone, and we had observers, and we would see the reaction of the people they shoplift in front of. That would be pretty dangerous, probably. Somebody might be killed today, but you'd never get away with it today. But
Well, at least probably arrested, right?
yeah, well, we didn't go with that. We didn't do that without the participation of the owner, of course,
Good, good,
the
good.
management. It was interesting because in Wyoming, probably not a good idea to commit a crime in front of someone. They will turn you in or grab you and take you to take you to the owner. To the owner. That happened one time. I had to intervene and say, no, no, we're doing an experiment. And the patron wasn't that happy. So, but if you're maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but if you're in Long Beach and you repeat the experiment, half as many people will turn you in. And
Well,
many times, if it was a couple, the woman said, "You got to turn this guy in," and the man was saying, "No, no, we don't want to get involved." So that was that was interesting. Talk about gender differentiation there.
yeah. Well, I mean, being able to, do research and, experiments and publish, it's all fundamental parts um, of academia. And as fun as it is, it, ha, ha, how did you figure out that this is what you wanted to do? Was this something that you kind of just fell into, or was this something that, you got a taste for and you knew it was right? How did you know that academia is where you wanted to spend your career?
That's a good question. Back at Long Beach State as a sophomore, and I had just switched into the speech communication department. I was talking to my advisor, good guy, Gene, or Ron Applebaum, actually, at the time, because I had switched from and I was still in the general honors program. So I said, Ron, I said, I looked at business and it just looks boring to me. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a priest or a minister. That nice, but I really don't want to do that. I don't want to be a librarian, although I thought about that as well. My dad was a librarian. My wife's a librarian. My niece is a librarian, one of my nieces. And that, of course, that happened after. But I said, I'm not sure. He said, well, these ivy covered walls are pretty nice. Being in academics can be can be fun. It's hard, but it can be fun. I thought about it. I said, oh, hmm, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I want to do that. And that's when I decided it was that or try to be a commercial pilot. I was getting my pilot's license at the time. I know this is going to be boring to most of your listeners, but commercial pilot would have probably been more interesting, but I just decided, hey, this academic life looks interesting. And I really found I enjoyed the teaching, but I enjoyed more of the research. That
Yeah.
was more my passion. Teaching was something I had to do, and I didn't mind. I liked it. It was kind of fun.
Well, I mean, I think that's an interesting thing, like to talk about is that, well, being an academic, being in academia, there's many different hats that you wear. So, what does the typical day look like for you or for someone in academia? How much of it is teaching versus research versus writing?
It depends. First of all, talk about teaching. Teaching, I never realized how difficult it was to be a good teacher. That is extremely challenging. But you can get by and be what I was, a so-so teacher. You know. Sometimes it went well, sometimes it wasn't so good. But it took a while for me in teaching to figure out it was not about me, it was about the students. I always thought I was supposed to be sharing all my great insights and all the wonderful things I knew, which is fine, but that's kind of boring to the students. You have to figure out from their point of view, what's the point of this class and what's the point of what they're learning. Took a long time to figure that out. I'm a slow learner, I guess, but a typical day, it again in the you have to look at the life cycle of a professor. And the way the life cycle goes, typically, you, by the way, just for the anybody that thinks they want to get a PhD, I'm going to say, I just have to say this. Maybe I'll be criticized for it, but do not get an online PhD. That's not a good idea. Um, it's okay if the online PhD is a good program somewhere and you learn how to do research. PhD is a research degree. You're learning, it's not a master's on steroids. You're learning how to do research. So, typical day for the life cycle of it. By the way, it's nice if you're tenure track, but definitely. Tenure basically means when if you get tenure, which is problematic, but if you get it, it's a job for life, basically. They have a hard time getting rid of you. They can do it, but it's really difficult. One of the things you didn't mention was I was a professor at the University of Southern California. I helped start a couple of centers while I was in the business school there, one of which was a Center for Telecommunication Management. The other one was the Center for Operations Management, Education, and Research. But I was also an assistant and an associate professor there. I was an assistant there, then I went into industry for about almost 5 years, came back as and was hired back in as they created a position for me as an associate professor. But the way it works is it's called 6 years up or out. As an assistant professor, you have 6 years to make tenure, basically, typically, if you're on a tenure track. You don't have to be on a tenure track, but it's kind of nice, actually. I highly recommend it if you're going to go this route, if you're going to go this route. And it's very much about your publication record, very much about that. It's critical. That is absolutely critical. There's no escape from that.
That'll publish or perish.
Publish or perish, yeah. And you have to publish in the right place, and you have to, win. Nice if you win an award like we did, and so on. But I had some of the assistant professors in my department at USC. I was sort of well, we called me something, but we made up the title. But it was basically the associate chair of the department. And they came to me, a business school. They came to me and were trying to figure out ways they could get tenure. I said, it's simple. Show me your publications. And if you don't have that, start looking for a job, just to be quite honest about it. And so it's not a trivial exercise to do that. So 6 years as an assistant professor, typically, we have an assistant professor in my department here who has three publications in a journal called Nature, which is one of the top two journals in the world, Nature and Science, Nature Physics, and I pushed, and he had lots and lots of other really good publications. So I pushed him. I'm in the information sciences department at the Naval Postgraduate School. So I pushed him. He's a physicist, but he came to our department and is doing some really interesting research on influence and other things. I pushed him to go up early, and he went up with no problem at all because of his publication record. He had an outstanding teaching record as well. So you actually have to do a decent job in the classroom as well. What happens is sometimes folks devote so much time to teaching, they neglect their research agenda. And that's a kiss of death, basically. You have to do both. You have to do both. So then, as an associate, if you make it, you're tenured with promotion to associate professor. Then, depending on how you do, and again, it's a lot to do with publications and maybe some service to the department and the school and your area outside the school. Then you move to full professor. And when I left USC and was hired at Naval Postgraduate School, I came in as a full professor, and 1 year later I was a tenured full professor. So I've been here for 23 years this year, 23 years. So that's basically, so what does a day look like in an assistant professor's life? Forget having a life, actually. You're serious, you just sort of have to forget. I mean, you have to be so passionate and in love with what you're doing. Um, early in your career, it starts out with passion. And if you have no passion, it's very painful and difficult, and you're just pounding away and you don't know why you're doing it, but you want to change the world in some way. You want to make life better, solve problems. That's what research is for, to solve problems. Some are, highly theoretical, complex. Others are much more practical. I was somewhere in between and tend more toward the practical side. And you also have to teach. You have to put the time in on teaching. My recommendation to anybody who is going to teach undergraduates, probably depending on the school, probably graduates as well, because of this thing called grading, you just have to telegraph to them what's going to be on the test. That's that's what they call organization. So I had to review our the folks. I have to do it here as well at the Naval Postgraduate School as well as at USC. I had to review the teachers and I mean the adjunct professors and our outside folks that were working for us and doing part-time teaching. And I had to review the teacher ratings and so on. And there's a high correlation between that person's not organized and we didn't know what was going to be on the test. So how do I get the grade? Unfortunately, that's from my perspective after many years at this, grading can be a hindrance to learning. Uh, so I force my students here, I'm probably going to be in trouble for this one, but I force my students here to get good grades. I don't have a lot of, these are very small classes at the Naval Postgraduate School. They're all graduate students. They're all mature. They're not worried about a job. Like my MBAs were at USC, very worried about a job. You say boo, they jump straight through the roof, because they were very nervous about everything and concerned about grades and so on. These guys and gals are not that concerned about grades. They always are because they're type A personalities, but they're mature, they've had management experience. And I say, hey, this is a corporate university in a sense. It's for the Navy, for the Marine Corps, for the DoD, and civilian, and we have a pretty thriving PhD program as well, which I reignited when I came up. It was pretty much dead when I came up in 2001, and I said we need to get that going again. And was doing quite well right now. But so teaching is important, very important. But if you, I mean, if you have this feeling of what actors probably get when they get on a stage and the applause, that may be the way you see the teaching, and that may or may not be a useful thing for you, but in the academic world, but you have to provide some purpose for the class and what are they going to what you have to put yourself, you have to go out and sit where the student is sitting and saying, what am I getting out of this? What is this, not necessarily practically speaking, but what knowledge chunk am I going to get out of this that's going to be useful to me? And some people just are naturally likable. I was not one of those people. I don't think I was one of those people. I'd like to think I was, but I don't think, I'm not sure that's true. But some people just have a natural affinity and the students just love them. And that's wonderful. But if you want to be a professor and you got a PhD is a research degree. If you're not going to do research, don't waste everybody's time. And don't waste your time and don't waste your PhD programs that are any good are lost leaders. They don't make a school. If the PhD program's making a school money, it's probably not the best PhD program to be in. Okay. Because you pay the PhD student at USC, we paid them quite a bit and still do. I'm not there, of course, but I know that they do reasonably well. Um, So, but the day in the life is teaching and research, and as you go up the ranks, administrative things. I'm on a lot of committees and so on and so forth. That happens. And some people love committees. I can't imagine why. I never have loved committee work, but it has to be done. It's one of those things you have to do. So I'm the faculty chair, which is like the faculty senate at Long Beach State. I'm the faculty chair-elect once again. I have to do this another time because I think nobody else wanted to do it. So I kind of got forced into it. So those are the things that we do. And I spent a lot of time at Naval Postgraduate School with my students. If I feel that they're not understanding what I created a couple, I've taught all the courses in the department, but a couple of courses I created. One was a research methods course. Everybody wants to teach that course. That's can be a lot of fun. And something called process reengineering, which is process optimization. It's like operations management type course. And as I'm having the students do the homework, we have maybe 3 iterations back and forth with a student on the homework. And if I feel that they really aren't understanding something, I say, hey, we've got to get together and I'm gonna give you a nice cup of Ely coffee, which is the best Italian coffee, Ely. I learned that when I was working for the Italian telephone company and living in Venice, Italy. And we're going to talk and we're going to make sure you understand it because I don't want you to leave here I don't want you to come out of this course without knowing, having a good understanding of the material. And so that's different because I have much smaller class. At USC, I had the MBA program had like 90 people in a class. That's mass. That's a mass of folks. And it's really hard to have individual conversations with them over the period of a semester. But at Naval Postgraduate School, I have 14 students in a class. And so it makes it possible for me to have individual conversations and I can mentor them. And they have to do a thesis, so I help them, often mentor them through their thesis. But when you're an undergraduate, when you're an assistant professor, you're teaching big undergraduate classes, you better figure out how to optimize that. And you better be doing research. If you do your dissertation and you don't get 1, 2, or 3 articles out of that go to good referee journals, and be careful of the referee journals, make sure it's a good referee journal. Journal of Intellectual Capital, which you mentioned earlier, I publish in that because that's the crowd I hang out with around those issues about intellectual capital. But in the information systems sciences area, there are top journals that everybody knows, and I've published in those as well. So you have to do that. Otherwise, you don't get tenure. And then as you go on, as you're promoted and move on, you do not, if you're an assistant professor and they load you up with committee work or that service work, that's a bad school. Find another school. That's not a
Yes.
good idea. That's not good for your career. And if you spend all your time on teaching and you don't publish, start looking for another job. It's just not, in other words, it's not a career for you.
Gotcha. Well,
But if you love research, that's good. And then as you get older, like me, really old like me, I'm still teaching. I'm still a professor. I haven't retired yet. Um, you better be obsessive compulsive about it. You just feel bad if you don't publish something, then you feel like something's wrong.
well, so you brought up just a moment ago, and I'd really like to touch on that, but mentorship. How important is mentorship in this field? And, what role has mentorship played in your journey?
Let me take you back to the University of Kentucky. Where I was there for 5 years, and they were getting ready to tenure me. That was the fifth year. You go 6 years up or out. And my wife said, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to be in California. I hope you are too. So that's when I got the job at USC. But when I was at University of Kentucky, I noticed that the students were complaining because they weren't finding jobs. And so I said, well, I got to do something about this. Probably a crazy thing to do as an assistant. Don't do this as an assistant professor, by the way. I don't recommend it, but I did it because I must be crazy. But I created an internship program. I had a lot of interns. I had like 80 interns, and we were able to place them into really good positions. You'll find schools like, I hope at Long Beach State. I don't know how it works at Long Beach State, but I know at Cal Poly, and I know Cal Poly's, they have very active internship programs. And those students often then will follow up and have jobs in the fields that they were interning in. And so that kind of mentorship is invaluable. Uh, that's what's going to allow them to see if that's really what they wanted to do, and the employer to look at them and for them to have experience on their resume when they go for an interview. At USC, one of the classes I created while I was there was this process reengineering class, which is it's like operations. It's really operations management, but I had my students, teams working. I went out and found sponsors for the teams, and they would actually work with real teams, real companies, real organizations, primarily for profit, some nonprofit as well, but primarily for profit. And they had actual real live interactions, and I screened the companies so that if it was not a high priority, then probably we're not the right people to do this volunteer work for you with my team. Um, and we had some pretty notable successes. One of the teams saved a small athletic club from bankruptcy, which is why I got, should say this off the record, which is why I was given life membership in that athletic. I didn't ask for it, but they offered. I said, okay.
Yeah, I mean, if they're grateful, they're grateful.
I couldn't do that. I can't do that now because I'm a federal employee, but then I was, an entrepreneur professor but at USC. And so, and then other students, one of the teams worked with some folks in the entertainment industry, and it was a terrible sponsor. They were terrible. And it was kind of a failure, not because of the student's fault. And when the student, I said, look, doesn't matter. Take your case with you when you go to interview. So he went to interview. One of the guys went to interview at Price Waterhouse, I think, and had that typical resume, typical interview. And there's a whole series of interviews in the consulting business. And the individual looked at his case and he said, wow. He said, this is interesting. This is the kind of thing we do. So he went all the way around all the mid interviews and went straight to the partner. And they hired him and gave him a rather large hiring bonus, even though that was theoretically a student work. But it was real. And so mentorship is very important, I think. Um, for people going through the academic world, mentorship is important as well. It depends on what field you're in. In the hard sciences, what typically happens is you find a professor that you're working with that has funding for a whole series of projects, a whole line of research, you might say, over a long period of time, and you're just participating in part of that. Um, in my field, uh, you're more, I wouldn't say on your own, but you're less directed by a particular professor, although that certainly is a good way to go. Um, I I did my own thing the whole time I was in. I never had quote unquote a mentor. I did all my own work. I preferred it that way anyway. Maybe I'm just selfish. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it can be quite helpful. The key for in the academic world is whoever you're working with, you hope that they also publish in the top journals, the top, or if it may be an area where books and book chapters are important, and you hope that individual can help you find the right publication outlet. And that's kind of what it's all about. But I never did that. I always did my own thing. So, by the way, one of my books, I think maybe you mentioned it, I can't recall. Um, it's called Measuring and Managing Knowledge. And I wrote the book for a graduate class in knowledge management at USC back in the day because it was a new area and people were very excited about it. And again, we worked with different companies in that class. And what I figured out with the way that book publishers work, and the students will be quite aware of this, is they take a professor and they say, "Oh, how many students do you have in that class? How often do you teach that class? Great. Yeah, we'd like you to write that book." And then if they're any good, like McGraw-Hill, Prentice Hall, McGraw-Hill, big publishers, we had 18 reviewers of one of our books. Part of that is they want to see if they might adopt the book, I think, whoever's reviewing it. But and then they price the book, and the pricing is outlandish. And today the publishers don't provide any editorial assistance. They're kind of useless. It's just a money making, I'm being very cynical now, a money making program. We know you're going to cram this book down your students' throats and make them pay these outlandish prices and force them to buy it and so on. I finally figured that out. And I said, I don't like this model very much. I said, send me 100 copies of the book as an advancement on my royalties for the book. They said, okay. So I gave it away to my MBAs. They thought I was nuts. I mean, how could a business school professor give away his books? That's crazy. So I don't know that I earned any kudos with them, but I just wanted to go around that model. I don't like that model. So that book, I got the copyright to it. I turned it into a PDF. And if you go to my website at the Naval Postgraduate School faculty website, you will find that book as one of it says publications, and that's one of the publications you can download, and you can download the book for free. The Chinese version of it, I can't give you for free because I don't have a copy. They do, when they translated it into Chinese, I think it's sold more Chinese copies than English copies, but I can't give that to you for free, but I can give you the original for free. So that's free to the world. So,
That's awesome.
but that's part of what professors they don't typically don't give away their books, that's for sure. But I do that because I just it upsets me the way because what does it cost them to print the book? Not very much.
Minimal.
And then what do they charge the student for it? Orders of magnitude more than what it costs to print it. That's just, to me, wrong, just dead wrong. I don't even use a book in my process reengineering class. I use a series of articles and things that I created for that class. So
Well, so I can't believe it, but we're coming up close pretty soon to to our time. These things always fly by for me. But as we're closing up, um, what would you say, if you could give advice to folks who are interested in pursuing a career in academia, um, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. So this is the advice that I would give. If you're interested in a career in higher education at the college level, you must have a PhD. It will do you no good to stop at a master's degree. And a PhD is a research degree. That's one piece of advice. You must have that. The second piece of advice is to find a school that where you can have some control over your fate in the PhD program and do the kinds of things that drove you passionately toward that kind of research. You will wind up teaching at some point, I presume, if you're successful. But you must publish. And if 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 you find no passion anywhere in trying to solve problems that really intrigue you and drive your passion, don't go into the academic world. It'll just be you'll be bored and it'll be unfortunate. The other thing, as I said before, I would prefer, it's not an absolute, I would prefer that you not get an online PhD. If you do that and you publish in top journals, I don't care if you have a high school degree, I'd still hire you because the publications trump everything else. But, and also, you do have to do a good job teaching now. So it's no longer just publications. You have to do a decent job of teaching. Make sure you understand what the students need and also telegraph to them how they're going to be evaluated. Otherwise, they'll say you're unorganized, and that's kiss of death for your teacher ratings. So those are just some basic forms of advice. And also, I would say uh, when I was in industry, um, and when I was at USC as well, I try to give back to the community, and I was on the airport commission at the city of Long Beach. I was an airport commissioner and a human relations commissioner in the Human Relations Commission. While I was there at USC, and we lived in Long Beach, so give back to your community. I think that's important as well. And
Yeah.
go to Long Beach.
Well, all
It's a
great
great
advice.
school.
All great advice to live by, and I think that that's good advice for everyone, right? Give back and go to Long Beach.
And could I just say one final thing
Oh
about
yeah, absolutely.
my experience is pedigree of degree predicts practically nothing.
Mm,
Okay. Whether you went to Long Beach or you went to Old Dominion, like my physics associate professor, doesn't matter. What matters is what you do with what you got.
gotcha. Awesome. Master of your own destiny, right?
Right.
Awesome. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your story and for giving us some insight into what's important for folks who are interested in pursuing a career in academia. So thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in today. We'd love for you to keep in touch with us. We at our website, www.csulb.edu/alumni, which again, this will be available for you to watch again on. And you can also feel free to follow us on our social media channels at CSULB alumni, so that way you don't miss the next edition of the 49er Industry Chat. But Tom, if folks wanted to maybe continue the conversation with you or maybe ask any questions, how might they get in touch with you?
My recommendation would be just email me. I'm old fashioned. I like email. So it's tjhousel1@gmail.com. I don't know if you've heard that clearly or not, but
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And we'll make sure to also include that. Well, Tom, thank you so much. And we appreciate your time. And everyone else, we hope to see you at the next chat. Bye-bye.
goodbye. Go 49ers.